So I did want to mention that. And that's a good thing, but it's not all good news this weekend. And it's not all about the memories that we have aren't all going to be positive memories, because there's some bad news. There's some negative news that's coming out right now. Because we just learned today, just a few hours ago, before the show, and we had to readjust the show a little bit, because we find out that John Lindh is being freed. Now, a lot of people, and this is according to the BBC News, and there's been some other articles by like the BBC News, in giving a more clear answer of what's going on. Because, as they mentioned, Mr. Lindh, who was an American Taliban, literally a traitor to the United States during an active time of warfare, which is an offense that can result in death. He served and fought with the Taliban and Al-Qaeda against America. He actively helped to kill Americans. That is a fact. He was tried. It was true. He admitted it. And he was sentenced to 20 years. This was after 9/11. And he was captured in 9/11, in 2001. And I have a lot of anger with this, I have to tell you, quite honestly. I have a lot of anger about someone who actively has gone out to kill Americans because of a fanatical ideology, and his benefit. He had all the benefits of America, the freedom, the ability to have his religion, to believe what he wanted to believe, and he decided that no one should have those rights, because that's what the beliefs are of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, the fanatics of their religion, that they believe women should not be able to be taught and have educations, that they can't have the freedom to speak their mind or hold jobs, that men are restricted in what they can do in terms of their freedom and how they speak, how they dress, what they think. This is what he believed. And this is what he was willing to kill for, to kill Americans for. Something that Iran is very much in favor of, that many of these nations are. And so he went and he joined it. And we see in the BBC article that he is being released early. He's being released 3 years early. He spent 17 years of a 20-year sentence for treason and aiding and abetting and killing Americans. Our Mr. Pompeo, who is our Secretary of Defense, he's out there, and he said he was deeply troubling, that this was deeply troubling and wrong. He goes on to say that he believes Mr. Lindh is still threatening the United States of America and is still committed to the very jihad that he engaged in. And this is something that has been confirmed and stated in many, many cases. Okay, so Mr. Lindh, at 16, decided to go to Yemen. He trained and fought for 5 years against America. During his time in prison, he has continued to mention and support the extremism of the Islam. We see that in the BBC article, which you may not see in many of the U.S. articles, that Foreign Policy magazine has documented in 2007 that Mr. Lindh continued to advocate for global jihad and to write and translate violent extremist texts. We see that late last year, Lindh told television news producers that he would continue to spread violent extremist Islam upon his release. And that more recently, the Atlantic magazine, the journalist Graham Wood, wrote letters to Lindh and was speaking with him and describes him as unrepentant. More than 17 years, and I'm quoting his more than 17 years in captivity, seem, on the basis of his correspondence to Graham Wood, to have converted Lindh from an Al-Qaeda supporter to an Islamic State supporter, which means ISIS. So this guy is just as violent and as dangerous today as the day that he was captured in Afghanistan fighting for the Taliban. He is just as much of a danger to the people and the public. And again, that was from the BBC. I want you to be able to see this, and you can look this article up for yourself. The article is John Walker Lindh, Anger as American Taliban Freed. It was from about an hour ago, today, May 23rd, from BBC News. In addition, there's also an article about this that I want to get into. Well, let me address this in a different way. There's a lot of issues with this, and I have a problem because this guy's going to Virginia, and if you happen to be in Virginia, please be aware that you have an individual who's going to be joining your state who is a danger, a outright danger to your state. That this individual is looking forward to the ability to go out and try to contact members of Al-Qaeda and to endanger your life. That he is, even though, and I want to be fair here, because in articles, and I believe it was in the Military Times, and here it is, in the article from the Military Times by Matthew Barakat, through the Associated Press, announced 20 hours ago, and the article is American Taliban, John Walker Lindh to be released from prison after nearly 2 decades. That came out yesterday, May 22nd. They do mention in here that he is going into Virginia, that he is still considered a danger, that the United States government still is going to be looking at him very carefully, that he is going to be restricted in many ways. And I want to get that portion of it. Where is it? Sorry. Well, essentially, I know that in the article, and I don't see it at this moment, but he's being restricted in terms of his access to the internet is going to be reviewed. He can't write in any language other than English. He is not allowed to go on to terrorist or extremist sites, that he is not to promote his extremist points of view. But yet, that doesn't mean that he's going to be safe. And in fact, both a Republican and a Democrat, Republican Senator Richard Shelby and Democrat New Hampshire Senator Maggie Hassan, wrote a letter to the Bureau of Prisons saying, in part, quote, "We must consider the security and safety implications for our citizens and communities who will receive individuals like John Walker Lindh who continue to openly call for extremist violence." There is the problem right there. And this is something from senators, both Republican and Democrat, that are saying you have to be on, the government needs to be aware and watch for this. And more importantly, the people need to be aware and watch out for individuals who have been identified and tried and proven to be guilty of trying to kill Americans. And this is something we must be aware of this weekend, as well as for the rest of our lives, because I personally do not trust Mr. Lindh, who has no remorse and had no appreciation for the freedoms and the love and the greatness of America. And yes, America is great. I disagree with Governor Cuomo on that. America was, is, and will be great. I believe that as long as we adhere to the principles of the Constitution, and those, very importantly, being the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, and the Second Amendment, being able to bear arms to protect ourselves from individuals like John Walker Lindh and others like the Taliban, like Al-Qaeda, like Iran, and other groups that are interested in destroying our nation, democratic socialists, that would destroy our freedoms and destroy our ability to defend ourselves and turn us into Venezuela, where we have the government attacking the people with tanks and running them over and shooting them because they've removed the ability of those citizens to defend themselves. These are very real concerns. And I have them, and I'm sharing them with you. And I hate that we have to have a conversation on Memorial Day weekend. at a time when we are supposed to be celebrating our nation and those who have sacrificed so much for us. We are spending it talking about an individual who has gone out and disrespected those who have died for everything he had, for everything that he has been able to do, for everyone in this nation, that we have to talk about this on this weekend. You know what? That's why this week, and we like to point out the shame of the week, and you know what? That's the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Shame on you. Game of Thrones kind of shame on you. Shame. If you had to release this individual, which I do not believe should have been done, he should have served all 20 years of his 20-year sentence. He's lucky he wasn't shot for treason. But if he had to be released, then why in the world did you have to do it on Memorial Day weekend? If for nothing else, just avoiding that visual, that mental image. You could have picked any other time. You could have gone last week. You can go the week after. You could have picked a different time. The man's been in for 17 years and 5 months. An extra week or two would make no difference. And they're saying that he's being let out on good because he's been a good prisoner. And I have to question, what defines a good prisoner? When someone is continuing to advocate, as the media have reported several times from 2017 until most recently, they are continuing to say that he is a violent and unrepentant terrorist looking to destroy the United States and the people of the United States, then I have to say that that is not a model prisoner. It is not someone who deserves to be released early. And quite honestly, I wouldn't release him at all. But that's my personal part of that. But why are we releasing him and then releasing him on Memorial Day weekend? Where is the sense of sensitivity about this whatsoever? Where is the concern from senators that is being respected and addressed and thought about? This is just wrong on every single level, and I am really upset with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, not because they're doing their job fantastic. You couldn't be sensitive enough to realize not to do this during Memorial Day weekend. And I hope the people of Virginia are prepared to have a potential continued terrorist in their communities. And I hope people will be aware and try to protect themselves and to be vigilant about what this individual is going to do, because he's only going to be watched on probation for 3 years. And after the end of that 3 years, which goes by very quickly, this individual is going to then turn around and be able to get onto the internet, both in English and in other languages, and promote the demise of the American people. And that scares me. And that concerns me. Not because I believe in freedom. I believe in freedom of speech. But that is limited by the incitement of violence. You are free to speak. You are not free to incite violence. And when we have an individual who has demonstrated the willingness to not only incite violence, but commit violence against our nation, which is treason, then we have to stand up and say, wait a minute, something is wrong here. We need to do something about this. We need to be aware of this. It's just very aggravating. And I'm going to take a quick break here because there's other things I want to talk about and I want to get to them. But this could take up the entire episode, and I don't want it to because he doesn't deserve that. And I think that it's aggravating. And I don't want to be aggravated as I speak because I enjoy you. I love speaking with you all. So we're going to talk, but I'm going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll have a little bit more of a conversation about a couple of other things which are kind of related, but not exactly. But we'll talk about it in just a moment.